I never thought I'd wake up one random Saturday morning, walk into my own living room, and find my parents standing there with boxes, luggage, and my sister looking like she had been dragged out of a tornado. But that wasn't even the shocking part. What really knocked the air out of my lungs was when my dad looked at me with that tone he uses only when he's about to declare something final and said, "She'll be living with you from now on." Just like that, no conversation, no warning, no heads up, no, "Hey, how do you feel about this?" Nothing. And I know this might sound cold to some people when they hear the story out of context, but when I tell you everything that led up to this moment, you'll understand why I snapped. Before I even processed what was happening, they had already started dropping her stuff on my floor, like my apartment was some kind of storage unit and I was the employee on shift. My sister didn't say anything. She just stared at me like she expected me to instantly fall into my old role, the fixer, the provider, the one who always cleans up her messes. And the worst part? My parents had that look in their eyes, the look that said they weren't giving me a choice. But I've spent years swallowing their decisions, sacrificing my peace, my money, and my sanity to keep the family together. So when they told me she was moving in, something inside me finally broke. Now, before I even dive into the whole mess, I need to ask you this. If your parents showed up at your door with your sibling out of nowhere, with zero warning, and basically forced them into your home, would you accept it? Or would you push back the way I did? Because honestly, I still wonder if I was wrong for what came next. And I need to know if any of you would have done the same thing in my place. Anyway, to understand how everything got to this point, I have to start from the beginning. Growing up, my sister and I lived in a house where the rules were completely different depending on who you were. She was always the princess, the delicate one, the one my parents treated like a glass doll that would shatter if anyone looked at her wrong. And me, I was the responsible one, the fixer, the one who had to be good, stable, mature, reliable. When she failed a class, my parents blamed the teacher. When I brought home a B, they asked why I was slipping. When she stayed out late, they said she was finding herself. When I stayed out late, they accused me of being irresponsible. It was that dynamic my whole childhood, me being held to impossibly high standards, while she got every excuse in the book handed to her, like it was her birthright. I didn't resent her growing up, not at first anyway. I thought that was how all families worked, that older siblings carried the weight while younger siblings got to be soft. But even as we got older, my parents never stopped enabling her. Every job she quit, every relationship she ruined, every impulsive decision she made, they always treated it like the world owed her softness. Meanwhile, every milestone I hit, graduating college, getting my first job, getting promoted, moving out and becoming financially stable, they treated like it was expected, like nothing I did was special. Fast forward to adulthood, I had finally gotten my own apartment. Nothing fancy, just a simple one-bedroom place that I worked my butt off to afford. And having my own space became something sacred to me. After years of chaos and noise and stress, I loved the quiet. I loved knowing everything in the apartment was mine, paid for by me, organized the way I wanted. I loved waking up to peace instead of drama. My sister, on the other hand, was bouncing around from one crisis to another. One month she was living with a boyfriend. The next month she was staying with a friend. Then she'd blow money on something stupid and end up back at my parents' house whining about how life was unfair. She'd get a job, quit it within months, then blame the boss for not respecting her energy. She'd make plans, then cancel them, then complain nothing in her life ever worked out. It was always everyone else's fault, always. But even then, I never imagined my parents would force her onto me. Things started unraveling more than usual after her latest breakup. Apparently, her boyfriend kicked her out after she spent their rent money on a spontaneous trip to Dubai. Yes, I'm being serious, and then acted shocked that he was mad. She spent the next week at my parents' house crying, throwing tantrums, and playing the victim. And my parents, they did what they always do. They coddled her. They comforted her. They bought her food, let her sleep all day, and told her she deserved better, while I was working overtime at my job because we were in a busy season, completely unaware of the storm heading my way. The night before everything happened, my mom called me, but I couldn't pick up because I was dealing with spreadsheets and deadlines. I figured she'd call back if it was important. She didn't. Little did I know that was the warning they believed they gave me. Which brings us back to that Saturday morning. There I was standing in my own living room wearing pajamas, looking at my family treating my apartment like it was a hotel lobby. My dad told me she'd be staying until she gets back on her feet, which, based on history, meant months, maybe years, maybe forever. He said it like it was a done deal, like I didn't have any say because I was the reliable one. My mom was already opening cabinets in my kitchen, talking about where my sister's snacks should go. My sister actually had the audacity to sit on my couch and sigh dramatically, like she had just survived some massive hardship instead of a meltdown of her own making. There was this thick, suffocating feeling in my chest, this mix of anger, shock, and betrayal, because it wasn't just about her moving in. It was about the complete disrespect of my boundaries, my home, and my life. They didn't ask me. They didn't discuss it. They decided for me, like I was still some teenager living under their roof. I took a deep breath and asked them as calmly as I could, "Why didn't anyone talk to me about this first?" My mom waved her hand like the question was ridiculous and said, "You're always so responsible. We knew you'd understand." And that sentence, those 5 words, ignited something inside me. They didn't choose me because they respected me. They chose me because they assumed I'd sacrifice myself again without complaining. They assumed I'd accept their decision, pick up the slack, and let them walk all over my life. They assumed I'd be the safe, predictable choice. I looked over at my sister, who was scrolling through her phone while they talked about her future like she wasn't even listening. Fallerson, she wasn't grateful. She wasn't apologetic. She wasn't even embarrassed. She was just expecting everything to fall into place like it always had. I finally told them this was a violation, that they couldn't just force someone to live with me, that I had my own life, my own schedule, and my own boundaries. And you know what my dad did? He looked offended, like I was being ungrateful for not wanting to house a fully grown adult who refuses to fix her own life. My mom said I was being dramatic and that family helps family, but what they really meant was I help them. They don't help me. They never help me. My sister finally chimed in with this bored, passive-aggressive tone, saying, "It's just temporary. Why are you making it a big deal?" And that sentence made my jaw clench so hard I thought my teeth would crack, because she said it like my home wasn't mine, like she had the right to be there, like I was the unreasonable one. And the more they insisted, the more something inside me shifted. I realized I had spent my entire life being the one who carried the weight of the family, and that if I didn't set a boundary here, right now, they would never stop. They would take and take and take until there was nothing left of me. But still, hearing the story up to this point, you're probably thinking the answer is obvious. Just say no. Kick them out. Lock the door. Easy. But here's the thing, when you grow up in a family dynamic where you're always the responsible one, saying no feels like you're betraying some invisible contract you never sign. It feels like you're breaking something sacred, even if that sacred thing is actually destroying your peace. In that moment, I wasn't just fighting them, I was fighting years of conditioning. As the argument escalated, I looked around my apartment, the one place where I felt safe, and realized that if I allowed this, everything I worked for would vanish. My peace, my privacy, my routine, my sanity, all of it would disappear the moment she unpacked that first box. It was like watching a slow motion avalanche heading straight toward my life. Before I continue and tell you what I did next, I need to pause and ask you this directly. If you were in my shoes and your parents brought your sibling to your home without permission and basically announced they were moving in, would you let it happen? Would you sacrifice your space and your boundaries to keep the peace? Or would you stand your ground and risk the entire family turning against you? Seriously, tell me down in the comments, what would you have done in that moment? So there I was, standing in my own living room, watching my parents act like they owned the place while my sister lounged on my couch like a guest in a hotel suite she had already mentally moved into. The silence after I asked the audience, my imaginary audience, what they would do had barely passed in my head when the real situation slammed back into me. My parents were still waiting for me to accept their decision, as if my hesitation was nothing more than a little dramatic pause before I inevitably fell in line. They expected it. They counted on it. And for the first time in my life, I looked at them and decided I wasn't going to give them what they expected. I wasn't going to play the responsible child, the fixer, the one who bends to keep the peace. Not this time. Not when it came to my home. I took a breath and told them firmly that she could not live with me. The words felt uncomfortable in my mouth, like I was speaking a language I had never spoken before. My mom blinked like she couldn't comprehend the sentence. My dad's jaw tightened, and my sister let out a sarcastic huff like I just inconvenienced her by daring to set a boundary. My mom immediately started guilt-tripping me, saying, "You know how fragile she is right now. How could you turn your back on your own sister?" But the thing is, my sister wasn't fragile. She was irresponsible. She was manipulative. She had been coddled her entire life to the point where she genuinely believed the world owed her soft landings every time she jumped off a cliff she built herself. Fragile wasn't the right word. Spoiled was, entitled was, careless was. But try explaining that to parents who had spent years romanticizing her flaws and criticizing my strengths. My dad started raising his voice, telling me I was being selfish, that family supports each other, especially in times of need. He said it like I hadn't been supporting the entire family dynamic my whole damn life. I felt my hands start to shake, not from fear, but from that boiling feeling you get when years of resentment start breaking free all at once. I told them straight up that supporting someone doesn't mean sacrificing your entire life, that I had boundaries now, that my home wasn't available to be treated like a fallback plan every time my sister's poor decisions caught up to her, that I was tired of always being the one expected to fix the family's disasters. My sister scoffed and said, "Whoa, you're so dramatic. It's not that deep." Hearing her minimize the situation made something snap inside me. I looked at her and reminded her that I wasn't the one who blew rent money on a trip. I wasn't the one who got kicked out of a relationship. I wasn't the one hopping from couch to couch every few months. I wasn't the one who refused to grow up. And then she had the audacity to look offended, like I just insulted royalty. My parents started packing her things into my kitchen like they were trying to force the visual reality into existence. My dad actually said, "You don't get to abandon your family." That word, abandon, it was like a slap. Because if anyone had been abandoned in our family, it was me. Not physically, but emotionally. My needs were abandoned. My struggles were abandoned. My boundaries were abandoned. My entire inner world was treated as second priority to my sister's comfort. And here they were trying to rewrite the narrative, so I was the villain. I realized at that moment that talking wasn't going to change anything. They didn't want to understand. They wanted compliance. They weren't having a conversation. They were delivering orders. And I was done being ordered around. So I did something I had never done in my life. I walked over to the front door, opened it wide, and said, "Take all of this and leave." My voice didn't shake. For the first time, I felt in control. My mom gasped like I'd committed a crime. My dad started yelling, saying he'd cut me off, that I'd regret disrespecting them. He threatened to leave and never come back, which was ironic because this was my home, not his. My sister started crying, not real tears, but those performative sobs she uses whenever she wants attention, the ones that sound more like whining than actual crying. They all started talking at once, throwing accusations like darts: ungrateful, heartless, selfish, cold, all the usual keywords parents use when you stop letting them control you. But I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I told them if they didn't leave, I would call the police and report an unauthorized entry. My mom screamed that I was threatening my own family. My dad stared at me with pure disbelief, like he truly could not grasp that I was choosing myself for the first time in my life. But I repeated the words slowly, clearly: "Take her things. Leave. Now." When they realized I wasn't bluffing, my dad grabbed the boxes angrily, muttering threats under his breath. My mom kept insisting I would regret this forever. My sister, seeing she wasn't winning, switched from crying to glaring, telling me I was jealous of her. That one made me laugh out loud. Jealous of what? Chaos? Unemployment? Constant drama? The inability to take responsibility for anything. But I didn't say anything back. I didn't need to. The look on my face said everything. They finally dragged her stuff out. But here's the kicker: they didn't go home. They took her to my grandparents' house instead, because even in their anger at me, they still couldn't let her face the real consequences of her actions. They still needed to cushion her fall. And I knew that by the time the story circled around the family gossip chain, I'd be painted as the villain, the cold-hearted sibling who abandoned her sister in a moment of need. I knew the narrative before it even reached the others, and I was right. Within hours, I got angry texts from relatives asking how I could throw out my own blood. Messages dripping with judgment from people who weren't even offering her a place to stay. They all wanted me to sacrifice my peace so they wouldn't have to sacrifice theirs. Funny how that works, right? My cousin even called me and said I should apologize before my sister fell into depression, as if her lack of accountability was my responsibility, as if my mental health didn't matter, as if my home was community property. I ignored them all. But my parents, oh, they weren't done, not by a long shot. The next day, my dad showed up at my apartment again. No sister this time, just him. He knocked until I opened the door, and he stood there trying to look calm, but his eyes were full of anger. He said he came to talk. He accused me of humiliating him and my mom. He said I'd made my sister feel unwanted. He said I'd broken the family apart. And then he tried to guilt-trip me by saying he never expected his own child to turn her back on her sister. But then something unexpected happened. I didn't feel guilty, not even a little. Instead, I felt relief. I felt clarity. I felt like I'd made the first real decision of my adult life without letting fear guide me. I told him that for years I had been the one carrying everyone, and no one even noticed that I had given and given until I had nothing left for myself, that I was tired of being emotionally blackmailed into becoming the family safety net, and that if he wanted to blame someone for my sister's problems, he should start with himself and my mom for enabling her behavior for decades. He didn't like hearing that, not at all. He raised his voice, told me I was brainwashed by independence, which made zero sense. He said I was too proud to ask for help, even though I'd been the one helping everyone else my entire life. He accused me of being cold, which was funny because the truth was I had finally warmed up to myself. I had finally decided to treat myself with the same softness they reserved only for my sister. He left angry, slammed my door hard enough to rattle the frame. Days passed. My parents refused to talk to me. My sister posted dramatic quotes online about betrayal and fake family, which was amusing considering she never tagged me, but everyone knew who she was referring to. Family members took sides, and of course most of them sided with my parents because it was easier to shame the one who set a boundary than to admit the golden child finally faced consequences. But here's when things really took a turn. 2 weeks later, my sister fought with my grandparents. They told her she needed to get a job or start contributing to the house if she wanted to stay longer. She didn't like hearing that. Shocked, right? She stormed out, went back to my parents' place, and started another meltdown about how no one understands her. My parents called me again, demanding I apologize to keep the family together. They said my sister needed stability, and that I was the only one with the space to provide it, which was insane because I had a one-bedroom apartment. One bedroom. But to them, it wasn't about logic. It was about reverting back to the old dynamic where I made myself smaller so they could stay comfortable. When I refused again, my mom said something that sealed the entire situation for me. She said, "You have the most, so you should give the most. It's only fair." And that sentence revealed everything. They didn't see my success as something I earned. They saw it as a resource they were entitled to. They saw me as a backup plan. I told them no again, firmly. And that's when they tried to escalate things by threatening to cut me out of their will, which made me laugh because they don't have anything to leave behind except debt and guilt. I told them that too. They hung up on me. Over the next few weeks, I focused on my own life, work, friends, myself. I finally started using my free time for things I enjoyed instead of doing emotional labor for the family. My apartment felt more peaceful than ever. I slept better, ate better, felt lighter. But the real aftermath came months later. My sister eventually had to find a job because no one else would house her. She ended up renting a tiny studio with a roommate she hated. But hey, at least she was finally living like an adult. My parents stopped trying to force her onto me, because deep down they realized I meant what I said. They stopped treating me like the fallback option. They stayed distant for a while, but eventually my mom reached out, not to guilt trip me, but to actually talk. She said she didn't realize how much they put on me growing up, that they took advantage of me always being strong, that they never meant to make me feel used, even though they had. She apologized, really apologized. And for the first time, it felt genuine. My dad took longer, but he eventually softened too. Not a full apology, but a semi-admission that they should have discussed things with me instead of assuming, which is basically the dad version of an apology, and I accepted it. My sister never apologized. Not that I expected her to. She avoided me at family events, but honestly, that was a blessing. Her distance felt like peace, and my life better, so much better. I finally learned how to say no without feeling like the world would collapse. I learned that boundaries don't make you selfish, they make you human. I learned that sometimes the only way to save yourself is to disappoint the people who expect too much from you. So now that you've heard the whole story, beginning to end, I want to leave you with this. Don't let anyone, family included, guilt you into sacrificing your sanity for their convenience. You deserve peace. You deserve boundaries. You deserve a life that belongs to you. If you were on my side during this whole mess, like this video, if you enjoy stories like this, subscribe for more. And most importantly, tell me in the comments what you think about everything that happened. Was I wrong, or was I finally right to choose myself?